Well, this evening, I'm very, very pleased to welcome Dr. Greg and Lisa Popcak. They're the creators of CatholicHOM, which I think they're going to talk about tonight, CatholicHOM.com, a dynamic online community that trains and supports Catholic families in becoming everything God created them to be, which we're all striving to do at one time or another. They're the directors of CatholicCounselors.com, a group of pastoral telecounselors practice employing over 20 full-time Catholic counselors and helping Catholic individuals, couples, and families around the world find faith-filled answers to life's most difficult questions. Together with Holy Cross Family Ministries, an episode of the Congregation of the Holy Cross, they are founders of the Peyton Institute for Domestic Church Life, which is where I first heard them and saw them, an organization dedicated to promoting family and spirituality, well-being through original research, professional trainings, and creative, and I will repeat that word, creative resource development. Dr. Greg and Lisa are the authors of over 20 popular books. Having written one small one, I commend you on that tremendously. Integrating the timeless wisdom of our Catholic faith with contemporary research in counseling psychology. They host a call-in program, More to Life, heard each weekday, Monday to Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, on EWTN radio affiliates and Sirius XM 130. So many of you will be able to tap into those. They also serve on the US CCCB's National Advisory Board for Marriage and Family Ministry, well thought of nationally, internationally, and I think by the Pope himself. Therefore, we are privileged and pleased to welcome them this evening, and I'm going to turn it over to the two of them. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
Teresa.
you so much.
Appreciate the welcome and the introduction, and I thank you all for being here this evening. Before we get started, we did want to share one little bit of personal good news.
And ask for your prayers,
please.
for
Yeah.
sure. We are delighted to be with you. We're sort of sitting literally on the edge of our seats because our daughter-in-law is in active labor with our grandson as we speak. And we just ask all of you to keep her and the baby in prayer because, you know, it's not over yet and we're all a little nervous. So you're all helping us pass the time and calm down a little bit as we wait. This will be our second grandchild in 3 months. So it's kind of a
They just keep coming.
Cool experience. It's wonderful. But we're glad to be with you tonight. And if we get distracted by the phone ringing, you'll know why, but we'll just find out what's going on.
We will understand completely.
Thank you so much. It's a joy to be with you all tonight. And thank you for so many of you being part of this and part of this whole series. It's so hopeful that so many are interested in expanding their Catholic faith and their idea of family life and the Catholic faith.
Just one small qualifier. Everything that Teresa said is right on, and we will be launching CatholicHOM.com in the next couple of months, but it is still under construction right now. So if you go there, you'll just see a landing page. If you want to get in on the conversations, though, on Facebook, we have a page. It's Catholic HOM. It stands for Households on Mission. If you go to Catholic HOM-Family Discipleship on Facebook, you can request to join the group, and we'd love to have you there.
And that includes any family members that you have or people that you serve that you're thinking would be served by seeing the information that's there and being part of that support group. So.
Catholic Home is a response to something that we've run into a lot, both in our counseling practice and on our radio program, where we hear from a lot of Catholic families who will say things like, I had a great prayer life before I got married and had kids. As if somehow, you know, marriage and family life is antithetical to living a holy life. But I think that we all can relate to that in some ways because, you know, without realizing it, most of what we think of as Catholic spirituality is actually drawn from the monastic and clerical tradition.
I have to say that on top of what you're saying, I just want to add, I see that some of you are of an age where you're concerned about your adult children, you know, as we have adult children as well. And times have changed so much, especially in the recent past, that you might be hearing things like, you don't understand how busy our family life is. We don't have time for church. We don't have time even much for our family. So whether it's the people you're serving or the people you love or you yourselves, we really do see that the model that we all sort of have defaulted to is this idea of the monastic and clerical tradition, where you take long prayer times, you have specific things set aside. If you don't have quiet in your prayer, like you don't have during family life, it somehow doesn't count. These are all things that people see as huge hurdles, and they don't really know how to have a family spiritual life.
And as a secondary part to that, even if you do manage to shoehorn some more traditional approach, and by the way, I'm not criticizing any of that. They're beautiful. There are a lot of beautiful things that we get from that monastic tradition, but they tend not to fit very neatly into crazy, busy family life,
especially these days.
And even if you do manage to shoehorn some of those things in, you end up feeling as a family like you're really only holy when you're doing those things, right? The other 99.9% of family life is just noise. And then there's that 1/10 of 1% of time where we're praying, and that makes we're holy. But everything else is, well, I don't know what. And that's a real shame, because marriage and family life is a sacrament. It's a sacramental life, and a sacrament is all about healing and transformation and sanctification. And so, how do we take advantage of that? What is the role of what the church calls the domestic church, right, in the holy life and living a holy life? Well, this whole Catholic home program kind of emerged out of a kind of a quest to figure out what that domestic church-based spirituality actually looks like. And so, actually, I'll share our screen now. Yay, it worked first time out. Look at that. All right, so in 2019, I'm just going to start. We worked together with our Sunday Visitor Institute, the McGrath Institute for Church Life at Notre Dame, Holy Cross Family Ministries, and our organization to host the Notre Dame Symposium for Catholic Family Life and Spirituality. And it was a gathering of over 50 really internationally recognized theologians, social scientists, pastoral and family ministry folks. We had folks from the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers, as well as our USCCB's, the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops Secretariat for Marriage and Family Life. And we were really reflecting on 4 questions. Are Catholic families called to relate differently to each other than our non-Catholic counterparts? What does an authentic domestic church-based spirituality look like anyway? I mean, is there really any difference? Can Catholic families be holy, essentially? What can research teach us about equipping Catholic households to practice intentional discipleship and raise the next generation of intentional disciples? Because the reality is, we spend vast resources of finances and emotional energy, spiritual energy, chasing after sheep that should never have been lost in the first place.
Our children.
Kids have been raised in Catholic households. So what can we do to do a better job there, forming intentional disciples who will carry their faith into the next generation? And then finally, in Familiaris Consortio, that really groundbreaking document from St. John Paul on the family, he talks about how 2 of the 4 tasks in family life Christian family life are promoting the development of society and participating in the life and mission of the church. Well, how can we equip Catholic families to take their place as those primary outposts of evangelization and positive change in our communities? And so, we gathered for several days with that group I was sharing with you, discussing these questions and really sharing our respective research and really trying to see what would it mean to create a structure that allowed Catholic families to really thrive spiritually and relationally as well. So what we did was really start by looking at what is even a domestic church? Because we kind of think as Catholics that domestic church is just a fancy name that the church uses for families.
Right. It's just everybody has a family. If you happen to be a Catholic family, then boom, you're automatically a domestic church.
And well, there's something to that, but there's a little bit more involved. But the problem is the church doesn't give us an official definition. But if you look at the writings of the church and you try to see those writings through this lens of domestic church, we've come up with a working definition, which is that a domestic church is a household of persons united to each other and God through the sacramental life of the church. So that's number 1, because you don't have a church without sacraments, right? So by participating in the sacraments, we are joined together in that sacramental grace. But then we also have to have a missional dimension to that. We also have to be committed to something, to living out the Christian Trinitarian vision of love in our relationships with each other and with the world. And the more we do that, whether that's with the explicit intention of doing it or just accidentally, the more we are a domestic church. And the more we struggle to live out that definition, the more we're called to be a domestic church. So every family is somewhere in between those two realities of already present but not yet fulfilled domestic church, if you will. How do we become better domestic churches? Well, what do you do when you go to Mass? You celebrate a liturgy, specifically the liturgy of the Eucharist, right? Because in the Catholic vision of church, liturgy and church go together like peanut butter and peanuts. I mean, you can't have one without the other. But if we're going to call it, and the church just says that the family is an actual church. It's not an analogous church, it's not a metaphorical church, it is literal church. So you can't have a domestic church without a domestic church liturgy. So what would that liturgy be? Well, we're going to get to that. But let's just briefly, I want to explain what a liturgy is, because we use that word a lot, but very few people actually know what it means.
As you can see on the slide, liturgy is a specific kind of worship. It's instituted by God, through which he works to heal the damage that sin does to our relationships with him and each other. There's a very specific kind of worship. We can all worship God in our own way, but a liturgy has a specific form of worship that is actively in place to help heal that damage that sin does to our relationships, both with each other and with God himself.
Well, it was created, and it was also created by God. So we human beings can't create liturgy. It has to be revealed, not instituted. And so to say that this liturgy of domestic church life is actually a liturgy, which is, by the way, not the church does not officially say that. I need to be clear about that. This is what we're proposing, though, and that to say that it's a liturgy means that it must somehow be instituted by God. Well, we would suggest that the Christian vision of family is actually instituted by God. You know, St. John Paul called marriage the primordial sacrament. It was the sacrament that began at the beginning of time, that served as the model for all the other sacraments. And we would suggest that the liturgy of domestic church life is the liturgy that's lived out through that primordial sacrament of marriage. And the more the family lives that liturgy of domestic church life that we're about to outline, the more it becomes an actual dynamic, joyful, peaceful domestic church. Let's skip ahead here. Bishop Michael Moradian, who is the Armenian Catholic Eparch of all of North America, he calls himself the Flying Bishop, but he said that the liturgy of domestic church life represents the mystical vehicle that communicates Eucharistic grace to the whole world through the living body of Christ. You know, we would say that, you know, when you go to Mass and you receive the Blessed Sacrament, you experience the real presence of Jesus Christ. That should change everything. Right?
And of course, we're called at the end of Mass to go forth and bring Christ to the world. Well, how do we do that? That's what we're going to be discussing this evening. How we do that as families, as domestic churches, really matters. It is a call. It is something we are called to do. And it's not enough to just sort of be like, oh, well, we happen to be Catholic, we happen to be a family, it's just going to happen. No, when we really live this out in an intentional way, it can change both the world of the people we're living with under our roof and have the ripple effect throughout our communities and eventually the world.
Right. So when we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, we should go home with a mission to live and love differently, starting with our family lives. And so the liturgy of domestic church life enables families to bring Jesus home and to make our faith the source of the warmth in our home. That's a very nice phrase, but what does that really mean? Well, at the symposium, all the research that was presented on faith retention and on what it takes to have our kids own their faith into the next generation, over and over, the researchers said that it comes down to the quality of relationships in the home. In those households where kids can say, our family is closer and warmer and more loving because of the celebration of our faith, the more likely it was that those kids would take their faith into adulthood.
Now, I want to be clear. This doesn't mean that their family and their childhood was perfect. It doesn't mean that no one ever argued or there was never a stressor in that family life. It means that because they leaned into their faith, they intentionally lived out their family life. They did things that created closeness and warmth in their home, often inspired by the fact that their faith lifted up their idea of what family life should be. They were able to say, we made it through things some of my friends never made it through. We had great times together that I remember and want to recreate for my own family or go back to on those holidays. It's a sense of the warmth in our home was present in the first place. It was a warm and loving home, and that it was somehow grounded in the faith of the family. That doesn't mean that they were, doing 8,000 decades of a rosary every single day. It means they intentionally said, God loves us, we love each other. Let's try to make this a beautiful, wonderful family life as best as we can in all the difficulties that life throws at us.
And so, the first thing I want to kind of put out there is when we think about family spirituality, we tend to think about family prayer exclusively. Now, family prayer is absolutely critical for a healthy family spirituality.
And I'll be honest, we advocate family prayer a great deal because it's not done nearly enough in Catholic households. It's something we really haven't taught in a very long time, and most families don't know how to make it happen.
I mean, in the US, there was a recent study from Georgetown University that found that only about 17% of Catholic families pray together, and only 13% even say grace. So, we have a lot of work to do even on that front, just to increase family spirituality. But the first thing I want to put out to you here, and I think this will become more obvious as we go through, is that family spirituality is bigger than family prayer. It's very much like, so the Benedictine order, for example, right? They have ora et labora, work and prayer. So really what they're trying to say is that their daily life and their prayer life is part of their monastic spirituality. Well, in a similar way, everything we do as families has to become part of our spiritual life, the way we relate to each other, the way we build rituals that enable us to have connection with each other, the way we serve each other and serve the world.
The way we even play together. All of these things matter. And that doesn't mean to make them more Catholic, that the whole time we're doing it, we're playing, CDs of Gregorian chant behind us. It means that we're intentionally saying we're doing this and inviting God in to do everything with us. And it's a stated knowledge of that in our family as we try to love each other intentionally.
I'm going to skip over this slide for the most part because I don't want to get bogged down in the theology just because of the time that we've got. I just want to put it up there so that you can take a look at it and see the 5 reasons that we would suggest that the liturgy of domestic church life is a true liturgy. I already touched on the first point, that it's instituted, not invented. That's probably the most important thing. But, as I said, the Christian vision of family isn't obvious. It was instituted by God at the beginning of time. It was given a special dignity when the Father commanded that his Son would be born into a human family and raised in that family. And it was raised to the dignity of a sacrament at the wedding feast of Cana. Those are things that God did to raise the family to a dignity that we believe affords it the dignity of a liturgy. I want to skip down to the 5th one, though, because that's the other really interesting thing. We talk a lot, you probably heard the phrase at some point about the common priesthood of the laity. That when we're baptized, we receive that mission to be priests. But I mean, what does that really mean, right? I mean, I'll be honest, when I would hear that growing up, I would kind of feel like I was being patted on the head. Oh, you're a priest too, you count, sure you do. But the reason I think that we have that sort of, or at least I had that impression, is that you can't talk about a priesthood without a liturgy either. That's why we celebrate holy orders and the Eucharist on the same day, Holy Thursday, because you can't have a priesthood without the Eucharist. You don't have the Eucharist without the priesthood.
And yet
liturgy and priesthood go together.
They go together. And yet in our baptism, we are given the roles as priest, prophet, and king. Both men and women are given that baptismal mission.
So, a priest in general, whether we're talking about the ordained priesthood or the lay priesthood, a priest's job is to offer sacrifice that unites heaven and earth, and to consecrate common things to make them holy. So that in general, that's the role of a priest. Now, the ordained priest does that by consecrating with bread and wine, and making that sacrifice of the Eucharist on the altar that unites heaven and earth and enables us to consecrate that common bread and wine and make it holy, the body and blood of Christ. Well, what is the liturgy over which the common priesthood presides? We don't have one. Right? And it's meaningless to talk about a common priesthood unless there's a common liturgy. So we'd suggest that the common liturgy of the common priesthood is this liturgy of domestic church life that allows us to use Christ's sacrificial love to unite heaven and earth in our homes and consecrate the world to Christ through our priesthood. And I think that gives the common lay priesthood a new dignity that allows us to really experience it as a share in the one priesthood of Christ, which it is in Catholic theology of priesthood. It's the common and the ordained priesthood are supposed to be two separate shares of the one priesthood of Christ, but we don't really experience it that way. This liturgy of domestic church life enables that to happen. We can talk more about this if you're interested at all in the Q&A section. But so this liturgy of domestic church life, has three rites. Rites are building blocks of liturgy. So, when you go to the liturgy of the Eucharist, there's the opening rite, the penitential rite, the let's say the preparatory rite, the communion rite. You get my point. There are lots of different building blocks of the liturgy of the Eucharist. Well, in the same way, the liturgy of domestic church life has three rites. Each of these rites is rooted in one of the three missions that we receive in baptism: to be priest, prophet, and royal.
So let's take a look at those rites, starting with the first being the rite of Christian relationship. The key word here, as you can see on your screen, is love. Now, this rite of Christian relationship equips families to practice the sacrificial love that stands at the heart of the priestly mission of baptism in their interactions with each other and in the world. Now, I don't know about you guys, but who sacrifices more than parents, right? I remember as a young mom once reading about Saint Teresa of Calcutta and how everyone was so in awe of the fact that she got up an hour earlier than all of the other sisters in the convent to go out and feed the hungry in the streets. And I was so tired as a mom of two tiny children at the time that all I could think was, she gets to sleep till she wants to. There's nobody waking her up in the middle of the night. And I remember specifically, I read this about 2 days after one of my children had woken me up, standing over me. She was probably about 2 at the time, and saying, "Mommy." And as I opened my eyes, she just vomited right in my face. I mean, that's sacrifice. When you're woken up to deal with that, to clean up that child, to love that child, we are practicing that sacrificial priestly mission that we're called to in baptism in how we interact with each other in our home, and then learn to love each other well in the world. But
it's not just sacrificial because it's suffering. What's sacrificial about it is the loving response we make to that. If I screamed and yelled at the kid, for being
absolutely
sick,
how dare you be sick, or go back to bed,
then that loses that sacrificial love dimension. It just becomes something I have to suffer my way through. The reason that this is a liturgy, the reason this enables us to heal the damage that sin does to our relationships, is that it reminds us to love not with the broken human love that comes naturally to us, but to always just gently challenge ourselves to try to love with the love that comes from God's own heart.
It's a spiritual discipline, just as Saint Teresa of Calcutta had the spiritual discipline of waking herself up an hour early, going out into the streets, serving the least of those. We in family life serve the least of those in our household, the people who aren't, whether it's our spouse or our children or our parents or whoever those people are, who aren't in that moment able to serve themselves well, who need us, who need to be loved, who need to be looked at in the eye and validated as human beings. All of these things are beautiful spiritual disciplines that allow us to learn step by step how to offer sacrificial love as the lay priesthood, and be an example of that to those that we're serving, so that they learn that by our example.
And in the process of doing this, we learn to love and cherish each other. Those are actually the two key words for the rite of Christian relationship. I just have the one up there, but it's love and cherish. Love, in the Christian world, means to work for the good of, right, another person. But, we can say, well, I put a roof over your head, I'm working for your good. But to cherish somebody means to really make them feel special. And God makes each of his children feel special. He doesn't just love us as a group. He doesn't just love us from a distance. He loves each and every one of us as unique and unrepeatable persons, as St. John Paul said. So as Christian families, we're called to, yes, work for each other's good, but also to cherish each other, to really acknowledge that specialness that each one of us has as God's gift to each other. The second rite in the liturgy of domestic church life is the rite of family rituals. And the key word here is connect. This is the rite that enables families to truly connect with each other but it also equips families to live the prophetic mission of baptism, because a prophet in the Bible calls people through their words and through their actions to live as godly people, right? To live a godly life. And so when families have strong rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying together every day, those aren't just fun things for families to do. They're the things that enable Christian families to communicate a Christian worldview toward work and fun and relationships and faith. And without those work, play, talk, and pray rituals, we can't disciple our kids into a Christian way of living. We essentially kind of give that over to the world to do, while we just kind of put the roof over their heads and provide a data plan. So the rite of Christian rite of family rituals is all about forming each other in that discipleship life.
And that does then puddle out to other people who are aching to know how to relate to the world in all of these ways as they're working, playing, relating to other people, celebrating their faith, talking together. They want this. The world is starving for this kind of connection. We know that one of the biggest social problems that people are having right now, not just because of, months to years of isolation during the pandemic, but just because of the way the world is, people are starving for connection. We have the biggest loneliness problem our planet has ever seen. But when we can live this rite of family rituals and really connect with those who God has put in our household in the first place, and then both learn and teach how to do that with others, and also just witness to it by our existence as a family, it calls people into the healing of those connections. And that's how it's truly prophetic. Prophecy doesn't mean or being a prophet doesn't mean walking around and saying, "You're sinning, repent," all the time, or standing on a street corner and yelling about the gospel. It's really showing people how to live a godly way and calling their hearts home to it.
The best way to do that is to witness to it through those rituals of working together, praying together, talking together, and playing together. The third rite of the liturgy of domestic church life is the rite of reaching out, which teaches families to care more generously for each other and for the world. This is the rite that enables us to live our royal mission of baptism by practicing what's called an ethos of Christian service. Now, that's a technical word, ethos, but it's a different from an ethic. All right, and here's the short way to explain the difference between ethos and ethic. If I don't cheat on my wife because I don't need the hassle, I have a moral ethic. If I don't cheat on my wife because I love my wife, I have a moral ethos. When you have an ethos for something, it means it comes from an authentic place in your heart. Whereas you have an ethic for something, you're just following the rules because they're the rules.
And even by that example, you can see that the idea of an ethos allows those who are on the receiving end of that person's ethos to thrive more. Where if it's just an ethic, okay, we're all obeying by the rules, but that doesn't mean we're thriving very well. That means we're just sort of getting by and getting through all according to some set of rules that either one person or a group of people believe in. It's doable. It's just not very flourishing or loving. Yeah.
So this rite of reaching out really, challenges us to see service as something that not just that we do, but really that we are. We have a tendency as a church to think of service as something we do for other people, right? So, men go off to do service in the men's group, youth go off to do service in the community with the youth group, the women go off to the women's group, and then we neglect each other at home.
Or we can neglect each other, and we'll discuss this a little bit later in what we're doing. And now we're seeing more and more that families are so burnt out by serving in these separated ways that they often give up the idea of even being part of parish life because they're exhausted and they feel torn to shreds by that kind of schedule. So this allows us to serve each other in the home and also go out and serve the world in a way that connects us to one another and again, helps us to thrive.
So let's look at each of these three rites in more detail. So again, the rite of Christian relationship teaches families to love and cherish each other the way Christ loves and cherishes us. It helps us to experience the faith as a source of the warmth in a home. It challenges families to form an intimate communion of persons, which is the first task in the 4 tasks of Christian families that St. John Paul wrote about in Familiaris Consortio. And so it enables us to consecrate our homes and the world through the practice of Christ's sacrificial love. And with each of the three rites, there are 4 recommended practices. Now, these practices, these 4, as well as the other practices associated with each of the rites, are actually rooted in the social science research that was presented at the symposium in 2019, but really drawn from a much larger body of work that talks about a healthy family functioning. What does it take for a healthy family, a healthy Inuit family in Alaska to function? And is it the same thing as what a healthy family in Uganda or Venezuela or Canada or the States or,
Anywhere.
UK, where, are there certain things that on a human level, healthy families need to thrive? And the practices that we identified with each of these 3 rites are those practices that are universal to healthy human families in every culture, in everywhere around the world.
And I have to say, as we've presented this to both lay people and bishops who are bishops around the world, they are all so excited because they say, this is something that fits our community. This is something that fits our lifestyle. And they're all from all over the world.
Yeah, through Holy Cross Family Ministries,
response.
I apologize.
Not at all.
Through Holy Cross Family Ministries, we've had the opportunity to present this now to family life ministers in over 30 cities and over 20 countries on 5 continents around the world. And in every case, people are saying this is a framework that works for them. I will also say this: this is not just a model for perfect families. Okay, this is a model for grandparenting families, for single families, for divorced families, for whatever your situation is. This model helps you work toward that Christian ethic of love or ethos of love in the home that we all long for, and helps us to have a healthier and holier home life. So, as I said at the very beginning when I defined domestic church, every household is somewhere between, that already present but not yet fulfilled kingdom of God. Every household is somewhere between living out that definition of domestic church and struggling to live out that definition of domestic church. Wherever you are, there's room for you in this liturgy of domestic church life.
And I have to say, and I think this is worth saying, that this is groups of people who are living out that definition. So even religious communities, sisters living together in a convent, brothers living a holy life who are not ordained, these people are domestic churches because they're trying to live together in that Trinitarian vision of love.
Yeah, people don't realize that the religious sisters and brothers are not clergy. They are actually they're a form of domestic church, and the definition that we offered fits their communities as well. And the more their community lives out something akin to this liturgy of domestic church life, the healthier their communities tend to be as well.
So this really reaches across whoever you are, whoever you're living with, you're in this domestic church to the degree that you're living out this definition.
So the 4 practices here in the first rite of Christian relationship. Number 1, really prioritizing family life. Seeing family life as the most important activity. There are some studies that suggest that families on average in the West get about 15 to 30 minutes together a day. We can't hope to be a domestic church if we never see each other.
And that 15 to 30 minutes is getting people fed. Sometimes they're in the back seat of the car. You're not even looking at each other, getting them, cleaned up and into pajamas. I knew a girl once who was a daycare worker, and she said that some of the parents were in the situation, probably through no fault of their own, where they would pick their children up 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, get them home, get them fed, get them bathed, and put them in their little sweatsuits for the next day so they could wake them up, get them fed, get them back in the car, and get them back to daycare. It's very difficult to live out a domestic church life when that's all you've got.
Now, the point of any of this is not to condemn anybody. It's not to say shame on you. It's not to say, it's to say there's more for everybody. If you've accepted any of these things as normal or just the way it's supposed to be, don't. This model is encouraging us to not settle. Pope Francis said that settling was one of the worst things a Christian person could do because it really ties God's hands. And so by looking at this and saying, we want to prioritize family life first, we want to put that on the schedule first and really say, how much time do we take? How much time does it take for us to function as a close, connected family? And then really schedule that every week and work toward putting that on the schedule every week, even if it takes 5 years to get there, consistently working toward that.
And it's that keeping an intentional state of mind where you're saying, how can we get a few more minutes this week, a few more minutes than that the next week, so that it becomes a priority instead of the priority of, well, what other thing can we tack on? Or let's just get whatever rest we can in those other few minutes and not even think about the importance of family life and being together. So it allows us to keep it at the forefront of our minds and therefore be selective about prioritizing that. I'm trying to remember what the precipitating event of this was, but do you remember talking to Sister June once? We were in a parish where we had an order of sisters that was with us for over 100 years in our parish, and they were invited
Not the
to
same sisters,
something. Well, one or two of them.
Go ahead.
But they were part of our parish life for that long, and they were invited to something very major. I can't remember what it was in our parish life, and they said no. They said, we have a meeting of our order at the mother house, and we can't miss that, even though this other thing that we were doing was really almost imperative. That
it was a meeting. It was basically a meeting about the survival of the school they taught at.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, and they weren't able to. They said, we can't come to it because we basically have our family meeting with our community, and we can't miss it.
And so how often do we as families stop and say, well, wait a minute, we're going to prioritize these times and then build our yeses to other things outside the home, other things that are asking of our time around that first, rather than saying, gee, we should all get some time as a family this week. And then we get to, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon and we think, oh, it didn't happen again because we were so busy. So it's that idea of remembering the family life is the most important activity we can take part in.
So I want to move ahead here and look at the second practice, encouraging extravagant affection. God's love is super abundant. Christ's love is incarnate. It is just overwhelming, right? The Son of God emptied himself and became man so that he could be with us and we could experience his love for us through our senses. And even after he ascended to the Father, he gave us the sacraments so that we could still experience his love through our senses. And the sacraments are always available to God's children, right? So God's love is super abundant, and it's generous and extravagant. God takes time out of the busiest schedule in the universe to have a family meal with his kids several times a day, actually. And so as Catholic families who want to emulate Christ's love in the home, that sacrificial love, we want to model that same kind of embodied, incarnational, very generous affection and affirmation in our homes, so that the more we're able to share appropriate, generous affection, the more our kids learn what healthy, appropriate affection looks like. And this word extravagant affection actually came from a study that was sponsored in part by Harvard School of Public Health, that found that only about 6% of kids receive the amount of affection that their social brains need to develop their full capacity for empathy and for affection, for caring. Only 6%. And those 6% of kids who received those extravagant, was the word they used, levels of affection in the home, they followed these kids from toddlerhood to their mid-30s. And they found that in their mid-30s, when they tested them, these kids did better on every measure of adult success: relationship happiness, life satisfaction, job satisfaction,
moral development.
Yeah, moral development, than the other 94% of kids who received less affection. There were about 85% of kids who received normal levels of affection and about another 6% who received neglectful levels. But the point being is, if you think you're being too affectionate, you're probably doing it just right. The third practice in the rite of Christian relationship: prompt, generous, consistent, cheerful attention to each other's needs. The Psalm 139 verse 4 says that, before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know its meaning. Before we even ask for what our needs are, God is running to respond. Now, he doesn't always answer our prayers exactly the way we think he will or the way we want him to, but he's always responding promptly and generously and consistently and cheerfully to all of his children's needs. And we need to do that in our homes as well, to really listen to each other. I can't tell you the number of people as a counselor, how the situation, I'm going to pick on husbands here, but it happens for wives too. But, a wife will say, I just need you to be more affectionate. And I need you to spend some time talking with me. And I need you to pray with me. And she kind of gets it. I need you to listen to me. And the guy just like, he's hearing all this. And then she finally stops talking and he looks at her and just says, I just don't know what you want from me. I literally just told you exactly what I want from you. What is, and my point is, we don't want to, he heard her, he just didn't want to hear her. And how often do we do that? We tell each other what we need and we don't hear it because we don't want to hear it. We want to stay inside of our comfort zones instead of reaching out and loving each other. And so this prompt, generous, consistent, and cheerful attention to each other's needs enables us to challenge that.
And I want to make sure you're understanding that we're saying to each other's needs, because there's an imbalance that happens in society where either it's just the parents who are bending over backwards to meet the needs of the children, or they're requiring the children to be courteous, cheerful, obedient, prompt in their obedience, but not ever really giving that back in any way. This is about mutual self-donation, doing this together as a religious community, as a domestic church, to all of us work for each other's good to a level of the ability we're at in terms of our development.
The fourth practice is what we'll call discipleship discipline. Then this is based on a child rearing system developed by St. John Bosco. St. John Bosco had a vision, and he never brings himself to say it was the Blessed Mother, but the way he describes it is this heavenly lady who appeared to him
in light and the whole thing.
I mean, it's all he all but says it was the Blessed Mother, but she appeared to him and she challenged him to give up the very harsh discipline practices of the day in dealing with his students in their school, and it was more than a school because he took care of the poor and underprivileged kids in Italy. And so he developed this system called the preventive system, which is actually one of the pillars of Salesian spirituality to this day. It's not just a discipline system, it's a method of spirituality because it challenges the educator, whether that's a parent or a teacher, to be gentle, to be compassionate, to exhibit self-control, to model the virtues that they want their kids to exhibit, and to create the kind of relationship based on three keywords: reason, religion, and loving kindness, he said, that enable the kids' hearts to turn to that teacher or that parent and want to learn. It focuses on teaching methods instead of punishment methods. We have a tendency as parents to think when a kid misbehaves, my job is to punish and punish and punish and punish until good behavior spontaneously erupts.
Now think about that. If you have a child or a grandchild whose teacher is saying they're failing all their spelling tests or all their math tests, and you say, well, what have you done to help them to do better on these tests? And they say, well, I've punished them for it. I've kept them after school. I've stuck them in the corner. They give you a list of punishments. Well, how has that taught them their math facts? How has that taught them their spelling?
But I punished them and I expected algebra to spontaneously erupt. I mean, but we do that. We do that with good behavior, and good behavior is a topic, is a subject that has to be taught. And so the St. John Bosco's preventive system really focuses on teaching good behavior, encouraging virtue, catching kids being good, creating structures that enable kids to succeed, so that parents, by putting a little more effort on the front end of parenting, are able to get a lot more joy out of being parents. And kids actually draw closer to their parents because they see that mom and dad are safe people to come to ask for help. They don't have to be afraid of being punished because they know that mom and dad are going to help them succeed as opposed to shame them for not succeeding. It's too much to get into in this talk, but we do discuss this at length in our brand new editions of Parenting Your Kids with Grace and Parenting Your Teens and Tweens with Grace that just came out this past year through our Sunday Visitor, which is all built around this Liturgy of Domestic Church Life model. And these are, by the way, the new editions of the books the classic parenting books that have been out now for 20 years. So the second rite, the rite of family rituals. And again, the key word here is connect. It helps families live out the prophetic mission and offers an apprenticeship in Christian living and discipleship by creating those rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying. Families don't just do nice things together, they actually model healthy Christian attitudes toward work, fun, relationship, and faith.
And this is the very practical part of this idea of the liturgy of domestic church life, where we can see as we go through this rite of family rituals that it really can, when we prioritize it, when we're intentional about it, the things we do and are called to do as a family that are very natural for us when done together with intentionality really do help create that warmth that allows us to live our faith and want to always be part of our faith, because it is part of what we've experienced as the faith in our home. It comes from that.
Yeah, so some examples of work rituals. I mean, by the way, family, when we get to this, it's like, oh my gosh, I have to do stuff, so many things already. Now you're asking me to do more stuff. I'm not asking you to do any more stuff. I'm asking you to do all the things you already do, just do them together. So you get them done faster and you get them done more warmly, right?
And
so,
frankly, you do it without losing your mind.
Pick a ritual, pick a work thing you do. You wash the dishes already, right? Well, what if you wash the dishes and clean up the kitchen together as a family every night? And you put on some fun music and you sang together and laughed while you did it.
Just one person, the kid, everybody's clearing the plates, somebody's washing, somebody's drying, somebody's putting away, somebody's wiping down the table, somebody's resetting the countertops for the morning, whatever that is, but you're all there, you're spending time together, you're making it enjoyable. It's going to get that cleaning up the kitchen time done in a fraction of the time and be a lot more pleasant and engaging than if we say, all right, Tommy, it's your turn to do the dishes tonight. And then we all slunk off to our own screens. Nobody spends any time together. Tommy's resentful, mom's screaming that he did it wrong. And the whole thing just kind of doesn't bear any good fruit.
The Christian attitude toward work, the Catechism says as much, is that work was made for man, not man for work. Right. And the point being that the world kind of tells us that work is what we have to just do to get done so that we could get onto the fun stuff. Whereas the Christian vision of work is that it's another way to bond with people. It's another way to show up for people and say, I care about you and I'm here for you and I love you, and to enjoy each other's time.
And it's truly how the world was evangelized, because, for instance, I think it was the Benedictines who during the early days of Christianity would show up. They'd say, look, the farmers are out there, the market is here, they need a road. And they would just come and they'd build that road, and people would come to watch them build the road, and then they'd eat together and they'd talk together and they'd learn about God over time. And it changed the world. Think how much working together every day would do for our family.
Play rituals are important because they teach each other how to have fun. We live in a world where people equate fun with self-destructive and sinful things. And if we're not teaching kids how to have wholesome, godly fun in our homes, they're not going to learn it in the world. Talk rituals have to do with making time, for example, over family meals, or father-son night days out, or mother-daughter days out, or whatever, parent-kid days out, where you talk about the highs and lows of the day, how God showed up for you this week, the answered prayers, the concerns, and you really learn what's on each other's hearts so that you can create communion through communication. And then, of course, family prayer rituals that invite God to be part, not just of, the morning and the evening, but throughout the day, at meal times. And when we bless our kids, give our kids blessings before different things, or our kids can bless us too. And we teach them how to be intercessors for us.
Or when we're just going about our day and something seems a little bit challenging, we can just say, hey, Lord, we really need you right now. Can you come into this situation? Or there's a blessing, you've gotten good news, and you just take that moment to say, Lord, thank you so much for this gift. We're so grateful and we give you glory for it all. Thank you. Those little moments draw us together in prayer and remind us that God is part of our family in every moment of every day.
So that brings us to the rite of reaching out. And I realize we're throwing a lot at you here, but we have limited time, so we will give you resources to follow up on it after this. But the rite of reaching out, it helps us live out the royal mission of baptism and teach us to care for each other and the world. And there are 4 practices here. And the first one you see is serving each other cheerfully at home. And we touched on this earlier, with the idea of prompt, generous, consistent, and cheerful attention to each other's needs. Attention has more to do with listening, right? Where this one has to do with actually serving, remembering what was said and doing those things to make each other's day a little easier and more pleasant.
And really, that's all you have to do is ask, what can I do today to make your day, husband, or your day, child, or your day, mom or dad, a little easier, a little bit more pleasant today? And we listen and we actually do it. That's serving each other cheerfully at home.
One of the things that we encourage, a simple way to live out this practice at home, is every day, And if this is something we do, you know, at our morning kind of brief friendly prayer time, you know, we'll pray for maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll just say, so what's one thing we can all do to try to help each other feel a little, you know, help each other feel loved today, to be a good team, to maybe take better care of each other. And we'll just kind of talk about what we might need from each other. And we try to remember to do those things. And it's a simple way that we say we're listening to each other and we're following through because we love each other and we want to be there and show up for each other. The second practice of exercising this right of reaching out is thinking about others while being a family at home. And this has to do with, you know, the little ways that families can be a blessing to others without even leaving the house. So there are two main ways. So we'll call it the ministry of stewardship and the ministry of hospitality. The ministry of stewardship says, you know, we recognize that God is the ultimate owner of everything we have, right? In Catholic social teaching, there's a phrase, the universal destination of goods. And it just basically means God's the absolute owner of everything, and he just lends stuff to us, and then we pass it on to other people when we're done with it.
Just like we often, when we're raising a family, when a child outgrows something, they pass it down to a brother or sister. Well, you know, that brother or sister is going to know, you know, did my brother or my older brother or sister like treat this shirt that I just inherited like a piece of garbage and I'm getting a tattered rag, or did they take pretty good care of it? So I know that they wore this for times when they were enjoying life, and now I can enjoy it as well. The difference is very tangible for all of our hearts when we experience that. And it's the same idea. It's we have brothers and sisters, younger brothers and sisters, not just in our home, but every person is a brother or sister in the Lord. So we take care of our things so that when we don't need those things anymore, they've served their purpose for us, we can gift them on to others in the world who need them. And we've kept them in pretty good shape as best as we can.
And it's not, you know, we're giving it to those people over there. It's that, no, when we're done with these things that God has given us and we're done enjoying them, we want to give them to our other brothers and sisters in the Lord who will now enjoy them, right. Whether those are gently used clothes or toys or whatever. The other, I mentioned the ministry of hospitality. Hospitality is actually a ministry. You know, people need places to go to have godly fun and fellowship. Make your home that place. You know, make your home the place that all the neighborhood kids like to hang out. You know, make your home the place where you're inviting people over for dinner, for a game night, for those kinds of things where they can enjoy and experience the love in your home.
Make your yard that place where you can have that time to grill out or have a glass of wine out on the porch or whatever that is. Think of how relieved and thrilled we were back 2 years ago when we would see a neighbor out on the street and be able to stand 6 feet apart, but actually connect with them and talk to them. Or when we were finally allowed to sit outside with each other and share some time together. We're all aching for that all the time. It wasn't just a pandemic thing. And when we do that and make people feel loved and welcomed, it touches their hearts and it gives them that glimpse of God.
Being a Christian family in the world, the third practice and the right of reaching out is a simple way to put it is the ministry of kindness. You know, Pope Francis makes a lot of this, you know, saying please, saying thank you. You know, when we go out about our business as a family, running errands, going out to dinner, you know, just doing stuff in the world, we have a choice, right? We can be that rude family that just ignores the server and, you know, bickers back and forth and runs people over as we run into the store and cuts people off in traffic. Or we can be that family that works really hard to do our best to try to leave people a little better than we found them. You know, so we do say please and thank you to the server. We do say that as a family to take care of each other. We do hold the door for the person at the store instead of just run them over. We do let them go in front of us in traffic. We do look for ways to bring a smile to the face of the people that we meet.
And why do we do it? Not because we're being pretentious, not because we're trying to work some kind of method even of domestic church life. It's because each one of those people are a son and daughter of God, and we have to take that time to acknowledge God in those people.
You know, and if love is working for the good of other people, kindness is love's little sister, right? It looks for little ways to make each other's day a little easier or more pleasant. And the fourth practice, families serving others together as domestic churches. You know, again, we tend to think of service as an individualistic thing. You know, you have families who want to serve at church, but they go to, you know, they serve 7 different ministries at 7 different mass times. what about going to the same Mass together as a family and telling the parish that if you want us, you have to schedule us for the same Mass? What about finding service projects at the parish or in the community where you call up the ministry and say, hey, look, what can we do all together as a family? What can our domestic church do to be a blessing to others, instead of letting Christian service be one more thing that drives our families apart? Whoops, I keep doing that. Hang on. There we go. So how do these three, we're coming to the end of this here. So whoops, I'm sorry.
Back to that one. It's important.
Yeah, I was trying to get rid of all that up the top, but whatever. All right. So how do these three rites go together? You think about building a campfire and use the word spark, kindle, and blaze. The rite of Christian relationships provides the spark of love that ignites the fire. The rite of family rituals provides the kindling that keeps the fire going and builds that warmth. And the rite of reaching out is the light and heat that fire throws that draws other people to the campfire. If you don't have a spark to get the fire going and you just have a bunch of rituals, then those rituals are just a bunch of dry wood piled on top of each other. They never light. And it's one more thing to bicker about.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of families do that. We have to have a family meal. We have to, get together and play a game. But because they
say the family
haven't,
rosary, but we're going to fight our way through it the whole
because we
night.
don't have that spark of the built-up Christian relationship in our domestic church, in our home life. But when we do, and then we get together for those rituals, it becomes a moment of warmth in our home and in our hearts.
Now, that said, I can have a lot of love in my heart, and when I see you 15 minutes a day, I actually really love you well. But if I don't have time to create those family rituals, what happens to that match? It burns out, right? That spark goes away. So I have to create the time and space to have those rituals that enable that spark to catch. And then that creates that light and that heat that draws others to Christ. Again, of course, without that light and that heat, it's not really a fire, right? So it's something else entirely. So the spark, kindle, and blaze are the way those three rites go together to create that liturgy of domestic church life that allows our domestic churches to set the world ablaze with the fire of love for Christ. If you want more information on this, I know this was like drinking from a fire hose, but we break it down in lots of different places. Those three books are probably your best place to get more information on this liturgy of domestic church life model, where we actually go into much more practical detail, give lots of different examples of how families are doing this and living that out there. So those three titles at the top, you'll see. More to Life is our radio program. If you've got questions, feel free to call in. We're on the air every day at 10 a.m. Eastern on Sirius XM 130.
It's live, it's calling, we take your questions. So feel free to become part of that family.
And of course, if you have families that you're aware of that need Catholic counseling services, CatholicCounselors.com is our practice.
And that is a telecounseling practice, so we can talk to people all over the world without them even leaving their homes or offices.
And there you go. And I'll just give one more plug for our Facebook page. Since CatholicHOM.com is not up and ready yet, if you'd like to join the community, you can visit us on Facebook at Catholic HOM. That stands for Households on Mission, Catholic HOM-Family Discipleship. We'd love to have you there. And that's it from us. We'll take your questions now if anybody has anything. Teresa, take over.
There are a few questions. I'm extremely thankful to you before we get to the questions for the presentation. And I know it's a lot, and you've said that before when I've heard you, but it all flows and it all makes sense. So therefore, it's easy to take in and absorb. And people, because thanks to you allowing us to record, will have the chance to actually look at it. So let me just look here at some of the questions that we have. The first question someone had from earlier is just to clarify. Saying traditional daily prayers is saying traditional family prayers a form of worshiping God?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course. And I hope we didn't give you the impression that it wasn't. Yeah. So, I mean, the point being that however you pray, whether you're using more formal prayers or more spontaneous prayer, it doesn't matter. What matters is you're bringing your heart to it, and that it's part of your daily life. What we were trying to say earlier is that, I'll talk to a lot of people, either on the radio program or in the counseling practice, for example, who, they really struggle to make it to daily mass, for example, with their, 5 kids. They struggle to make it to adoration. They struggle to do the liturgy of the hours.
Or to do the longer forms of traditional prayer, like the rosary, like a full rosary.
With
You try
their
to do that
3-year-old,
with a
you know?
2-year-old and a nursing baby, and you're losing your mind.
Now, those are all beautiful and wonderful ways to worship God, absolutely. But if you can't do them because you're in a particular state of life where your kids can't handle it, or you just don't have the time for it, you end up feeling like a second-class citizen in the church. And you shouldn't have to. There should be an authentic domestic church-based spiritual way, a path for you. And that's why this liturgy of domestic church life is so important. It's not that the other forms of prayer are somehow deficient or don't measure up. It's that not everybody can access them. And so the people who can't feel left out.
And if they can, then it's another way to enhance your domestic church life. So there are ages and stages for that. So if I have, a 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 14-year-old, and I've been living a domestic church life, they have a sense of who God is, and we want to teach them a richer sense of prayer with the rosary or the liturgy of the hours or any of our traditional prayers. It becomes richer because of the way they've gotten to know God in the home, and it makes sense to them. What doesn't work, either for us as individual people praying on our own or for us praying as a family, is to say a bunch of words to check it off our list. I did the rosary today. I didn't think one iota about God. I got those words out as fast as I could.
I don't remember what mysteries they were.
I don't even know what mysteries they were, but darn it, I got it off my to-do list, and I can say I raised my kids praying the rosary or fill in the blank. When all prayer has to be about our relationship with God, and in a family setting or a domestic church setting, also our relationship with each other. So it's about discerning what prayer forms to use for the ages, the stages, and the situations that we're in that are going to make us feel most connected with God and bring our hearts to God.
Never want to give anybody the impression there's a wrong way to pray. There is no wrong way to pray. But there are some kinds of prayers that don't work for people's age and stage. And so this liturgy of domestic church life fills a big gap for those people.
Yes, thank you. There's a few more questions. I just want to add, I think this is the beauty of your approach, this holistic approach, because when we look at the research, often children who were raised in good, faithful homes who don't go to church will say, it's because I didn't see the actions. We prayed and we heard what God said, but we weren't doing it in our family. And you're bringing it in, tying it full circle in. So that's wonderful. So someone has asked earlier, to a degree you answered it a little bit, but you may have more to say. Is ethos the reason for the action?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, right. So superficially, if I have a moral ethic where I don't cheat on my wife because I don't need the hassle, versus if I have a moral ethos because I don't cheat on my wife because I love my wife. I mean, superficially, it looks the same. I'm not cheating on my wife. But I mean, you would rather your spouse not cheat, be faithful to you because they love you, right? Not because they have to. And so that's the difference, right? Superficially, it looks the same, but in your heart, it comes from a very different place. I would also say this, in the practice, and this is actually just true of everybody, but we see this a lot with our Catholic clients, that so many of us are in a place where we're working for love instead of working from love. Right? I'm afraid that if I don't cross all my T's and dot all my I's and do all the things the church tells me to do, or whoever expects of me, that I'm not gonna get the love. So I kill myself serving everybody, and I burn myself out, and I wear myself down to a nut because I have to, because I need to get that love. That's not authentic Christian service. That doesn't build me up. That tears me apart, right? Whereas that ethos is, I feel that it's like the old children's song, "Oh, how I love Jesus because he first loved me," right? I feel that love in my heart, and it just overflows, and I want to share it with you. That's the difference. And anybody who's in that place where they're working for love, I'm not condemning you or criticizing you for it. I'm saying that there's a wound that needs to be healed, that God doesn't want you to do more. He doesn't want you to jump through more hoops by doing this liturgy of domestic church life because it's one more thing that you have to do to prove that you're a good Catholic. This is something that you can do to heal that wound so that you can work from love instead of for love.
Okay, next question is one I've heard numerous times in my office. My husband and I have practiced our faith with our large family, Grace Nightly Family Rosary, each year taught Faith and Life series, 1 volume per year. There are 8 volumes, and regularly attended church. My husband is very knowledgeable in his faith, My youngest son is the only one left in the house and doesn't want to go to church, and he's not sure he believes in God. We have decided not to force him to go to church since he has been confirmed. Would you say that we are not helping him by taking this direction? We are concerned forcing a division within us. I have begun a short nightly ritual, opening a small pamphlet, a guy's devotion. He isn't happy about it, but I am forcing him to have this 15 minutes nightly discussion. I am hopeful and trying to make it a priority. Any ideas? Really sad that all except one child doesn't go to church or believe in God.
Okay, so I want to, this is always difficult to answer these kinds of questions because every situation is different. I mean, we hear it's different iterations of the same problem, but you know, so my answer isn't going to completely satisfy you because I don't know all the details and I can't get into it in this forum, but I can give you in very broad strokes. Okay. You know, what you're describing, generally speaking, we talk about this a lot in Discovering God Together. When teens, especially older kids, older kids and young adults can be a little different, but teens especially, when they say things like they're rejecting the faith, it tends to mean one of two things. The first thing is that there are stages of faith, and as kids move from the elementary school years into adolescence, their focus on how they know what's true and what faith means shifts. In that earlier stage is what you call maybe the story and structure stage of faith, where you have kids who are in elementary school who are still trying to learn how the world works and how stuff happens. So they're all about going through structures. You get altar boys who just love serving at mass. You get the kids who love doing the dishes or doing the thing because they're getting the structure. They love stories that you have to share with them. They really love hearing that. Bible stories and all the saint stories, and they just eat it up. And parents are like, oh, my kid is so faithful. They just love all those stories and they love all that structure. When you get into adolescence, they shift away from stories and structure to a relationship-based faith. I know something is true to the degree that it facilitates my relationships. I believe something is false to the degree that it complicates my relationships. And this is where parents kind of fall down, because they'll still be focusing on that structures thing and saying, well, you can't do these things and you can't hang out with those people and you can't do these other things. And so faith becomes this big thing that undermines all my relationships, which means that it's false. So when I say I don't believe in God, what I'm really saying a lot of times is I'm not being shown how my faith can help facilitate healthy, godly relationships and help me find my place in the world. So that's the first possibility. What can you do to help address those questions that your teens have about how their faith can help them have healthy relationships and find a healthy place in the world, as opposed to just saying, don't do this and don't hang out with those people and don't engage in these other things. There's a second thing.
And not only the world, but with mom and dad, because too often kids, especially our youngest kids who have parents who are very faithful and involved in their churches, often feel like they're losing mom and dad's attention to those religious practices. So this is where we remember that our family activity is the most important activity we can do. And so we don't only spend time with our kids when we're praying, we make sure we're connecting with them through that work, through that talk, through that play together, so that they not only get to launch out into the world and connect in relationships because we've taught them how, but they feel grounded in the love that we have for each other as a family. And then they can see those moments of God.
The second thing is, and this is also about relationship, is that teens especially will sometimes, when they have relationship issues with mom and dad, they want to get your attention. And they know the best way to get your attention is to reject your faith, right? And what they're really saying when they say, I don't believe in God or I don't believe in the church is, I'm mad at you about something. It's really got nothing to do with God or the church, because in many cases, they haven't had a personal encounter with God yet. They've gone through the motions of it. They've learned the stories and the structures, but they haven't experienced it. And so the question you have to start asking yourself is, or asking the kid is, you know what? I feel like you're trying to get my attention by telling me that you don't love God or you don't believe in the church or any of that. And obviously that hurts my heart to hear, but I can't help but wonder if you're not trying to tell me that you're upset or hurting about something that I haven't been hearing from you. What is it that you're trying to tell me that I haven't been listening to? and start that conversation. I think it's important to make your kids do those rituals like going to mass and all that, but it's not just about forcing them to go to church or forcing them to pray. Yes, you should require them to show up, but that's not going to solve it by itself. There needs to be a discussion afterward, like, okay, you know what, you were rolling your eyes the whole time at mass, which says to me that you're upset about something. You're mad at God about something. You're mad at me about something. You're frustrated with it. Tell me about it. Talk to me. I want to know what's going on. Help me understand where you're at.
You see the difference between that and don't you dare make those faces while we're at mass. What are people going to think?
Right.
It's a very different dynamic.
But it's a relationship, right? So like if I have a problem with my mom, you know, I don't want to stop going to family dinners because then I don't get to work out the problem with my mom, right? So if my wife makes me go to family dinner with my mom, that gives us a chance to work out the problem, right? It's not just, but if I just go and I show up and I don't talk to my mom the whole time, then I leave, you know, well, that misses the point. So it's not just about forcing your kid to do the thing. It's about requiring them to do the thing so that it precipitates the conversation that really needs to be had and the healing that needs to occur. So if that makes sense, that's what I would suggest the thing that needs to happen here. He's trying to tell you something, and this is the best way he knows to communicate that.
Good, thank
If
you.
you can't figure it out, sorry, if you can't figure it out, that might be an indication that family therapy might be useful here. Not for the spiritual side of it, but to heal the human relationship that opens up those lines of communication. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and as they say too, sometimes our relationships are someone else's reality. We think they're great and we find out they're not. So these might be indicators. So that's a great point. Just a comment by someone here about their family sharing on birthdays. They sit at the table and take turns sharing something special about the birthday person and what they're grateful for, which is lovely. And someone else says too, they celebrate by end of the month by going to the hockey game. So those are special moments. Those are exactly what we're hearing.
Those are those rituals that you put into family life that leave us with good, warm memories. Let us know we're all invested, prioritize that time with each other, give that affection. Those are all great starters. So if those work for your family, then you keep those going and you think, well, what's one more thing I could do? You know, do we only compliment each other once a year at birthdays? Could we be doing it at the end of every day when we do our prayer time, where we just, you know, say, thank you, God, that, you know, Susie was so thoughtful today that, you know, I was really under the gun and I came home and she helped me fold all the laundry because she knew that I was.
Thank you for what a gift she is.
Yeah, thank you for the gift that she is, and on around the family. You know, think of how you can take those beautiful things that mean so much to your family and do them a little bit more in a different way.
Yes, and it's a question related to the topic you're discussing. What do you suggest when you have a teenager that does not want to do any family bonding time or rituals?
And again, interpret the behavior, right? You that behavior is screaming loudly. They're saying, and you want to kind of read that back to them. It's like, look, when you act this way, it tells me that you think that I don't want to listen to something you have to say. It tells me that you're angry or you're hurting or you're frustrated with me and you're not sure how to communicate it and you're not sure I'm going to listen. And I'm sorry. And I want to hear what it is. I'm not sure I'm going to do a great job necessarily, but if you hang in there with me, we'll figure it out together.
Now, remember that spark, kindle, blaze, okay? If you're doing all these rituals and you're getting that kind of pushback, that angry pushback from a family member, it means that something about that is just leaving you with a stack of cold, dry, dead wood. You haven't gotten that spark. There's something in the relationship that's off that needs to be attended to and nurtured and cared about, not ignored. That dry, cold wood, nobody wants to stand around that and stare at it. Nobody's gonna, like, you know, make s'mores over dry, dead wood. It doesn't give you that warmth. But if you go back and say, okay, we're doing all these rituals, we're working together, we're playing together, I'm making them do these games, we're making them go to church.
And my kid hates me for it.
And they resent it, they're pushing back. Well, then we have to go back to what's going to give us that spark. And sometimes it's really, don't guess, ask.
Yeah, I will say this. Too many times and I see this a lot with well, it happens with all parents, but I work with Catholics all the time, right? So we treat these things as behavior problems instead of relationship problems, right? So, you know, the kid doesn't want to participate in game night, so I ground them for a week, you know, and that makes them really want to spend time with me then, right? No, I'm not saying it's it's not appropriate behavior. You need to do
And
something
we all
about
get
it.
frustrated, so that's what we end up
Yeah.
going to.
But the discipleship discipline, to go back to that fourth practice in the first rite, the discipleship discipline, that's where we say, okay, I need to collect this kid. This sheep has wandered away. So I need to go and find them and say, what's going on? I want to listen. I want to hear it. And I want to work it out with you.
And I want to problem solve it with
Let's
you.
figure this out together. I'm listening now. So, and if you can't figure out how to do that yourself, there's no shame in saying, you know what, we need new skills. Let's go get some counseling together.
And I want to add, for those of you with very adult children who are still having these problems with them, they're still rolling their eyes at you, giving you a hard time, not wanting to go to church, name the litany. It works the same way. Go back to that relationship. Where is it broken down? How can you work toward healing it? Sometimes that's addressing it head on. Sometimes that's connecting in small ways that doesn't make it about a big battle or a big conversation, by just, texting them a joke, inviting them to play words with friends, getting together just to go shopping or have a piece of pie if they live around you, and not making a big deal out of everything, but building that relationship little by little, so it's not all put on Christmas or Easter Sunday, and then you don't have anything the rest of the time.
We just did a book, it just came out in November, called Having Meaningful and Sometimes Difficult Conversations with Your Adult Sons and Daughters. And we basically we don't specifically talk about the liturgy of domestic church life, but we basically talk about all the components of it as applied to adult kids. And so they're kind of, well, there's, I was going to say two things. I don't want to monopolize the conversation here. But the big thing that I wanted to put out there is that in order for us to have meaningful conversations with anybody, but especially our adult kids, the relationship has to be big enough to contain the conversation we want to have. So think about it this way. Like, imagine you have a shot glass on your counter and you got a gallon jug of milk. Okay, or 2 liters, whatever you guys have up there. No, I'm sorry. You're trying to pour this gallon jug of milk into the shot glass, and it just spills all over the place, right? And then you say to yourself, you know what? The problem is the way I'm pouring. So I'm going to pour a lot slower this time. And then it all ends up all over the floor anyway. And then you think, you know what? If I pour it in really fast, maybe I'll get it in there. And then you try to put it all out there at once. And that doesn't work either. And then you spin around 3 times and you throw it over your shoulder. And you think that the problem is the shot glass, right? It's the relationship is not big enough to contain the conversation you want to have. So if you're trying to talk about a subject and your kid's pushing you away, especially your adult kids, it means that they don't feel like you spend enough time with all the other stuff that they care about, that they're interested in, that's important to them. And you're trying to do this, you're trying to do your agenda with them, and it's just not deep enough and big enough to handle all that, right? So you want to back up and try to make the relationship deeper so you can have that conversation. And we talk through the steps of doing that and having meaningful, sometimes difficult conversations with our adult sons and daughters.
Lovely, thanks for the recommendation. The last question here maybe is, given that boys and girls receive love differently, can you give some tips on how best to show love to each, considering neurological and other developmental differences?
Okay, stop being so highfalutin and ask them.
Yeah,
Plain and simple. Don't give me they have different brain development and guys do it. Nope. You can have 800 people in a room of a particular gender, and they're all going to perceive love differently. Do you want to know how to love somebody? Ask them, what can I do today that will make you feel loved and cherished by me? We had a gentleman who called into our radio station one day. I kid you not. He said, so Greg and Lisa, I want to know what I should get for my wife for her birthday.
I mean, I don't know. And if I do know, you have an even bigger problem.
He was a complete stranger, and he wanted randomly to know what we thought, because we knew how to, teach people how to love one another. We said, have you asked her?
This is a different guy, but
No.
at a men's conference once, I had a guy come up to me after my talk, and he said, Dr. Greg, it took me 25 years to realize I wasn't going to get any credit for giving my wife stuff she didn't want. And, we laugh about it, and I share that story, we all chuckle, but the truth is we can relate to that, because we love people the way we want to love them, not the way they really need to be loved. And the way we get at it is we actually have to go and ask.
We have to ask. We can't guess. We can't look at, we had a relative once who bought all my kids denim hats with sparkles on them, because she read that those were the two trendiest things of the year, denim and sparkles.
So put them together.
They put them together. She thought this will hit. She never bothered to say, hey, what are the kids into right now? What do they like? What would they like to do? I'd like to do something with them. Whether it's your spouse or your parents or your kid, ask.
And if they don't say, one of the things that we talk about doing in our marriage books, but this is actually a really good family meeting exercise, is just to come up with what we call a love list. They're a list of 10 to 20 things that you write down that make you feel special when somebody does them for you, or if they would.
Just gives you that kind of, somebody cared about me feeling.
And everybody in the family writes down that list of 10 to 20 things that make them feel cared for, and be specific. So like what I always tell couples, don't just say be affectionate. Say, I like when you hold my hand, or I like when you sit on the couch with me, as opposed to just be affectionate, right? And then you can take all those things and post them on the fridge, right? Or put them in some public place. And then make it your assignment every day for everybody to look at those lists and pick something to do for one person. And every day it should be a different person, but just pick one thing to do for that person on their list to make them feel special or cared for. And it becomes a family project, So, the more we ask that and create that sort of that ethic, or that ethos of love and service, and really promptly, generously, and consistently listening to each other's needs, the more we really make that love happen, even though despite those differences.
Lovely. And there is one last question that you're going to need a whole other hour to answer.
Yeah.
How do you get them off their phone so you can develop a relationship?
Spend time with them and make it fun.
Because here's the thing, we get that question all the time. Here's the question we always ask parents whenever they ask us that. If your kid put down the phone, what would you do with them?
Right.
And then we get crickets because we don't know. I mean, that was funny. When Oprah was on TV, she did an actual kind of give up your phone week sort of a thing. And the kids actually had an easier time of it than the parents did, which was hysterical, right?
Yes, I saw that.
Kids all the time, but it's the parents who have the hard time with it. And if the reason our kids are on their phones and on playing video games so much is we don't have family rituals. We don't have a game night. We don't have time to one-on-one talk with them. We don't make that time. And we just say, go off and do your thing because I have to get all this work done. Well, if we actually did the dishes together, then we could play a game together because we'd have time to do that. If we folded laundry together and talked, they'd actually want to be around us, and then maybe we could go play the video game together. But it's the issue is we don't give them anything else to do, so they fill up the vacuum with the digital stuff.
And they're connecting with people in a fun way, in a way that those people at the other end, their friends from school or wherever, actually are having fun with them, listening to their hearts, listening to their concerns, talking about things that are interesting. If we're not doing that with them, you could throw that phone in the river. It's not going to make you feel any more connected to each other.
They're longing for that connection. So the fact is, the connection they create with peers is actually pretty shallow. Research really shows that the peer connection is not very deep. And if they prefer it over connection with us, what it means is that our connection is even more shallow. So if we just put a little bit of time and energy into creating these rituals, they'll give up the phone. We'll have to kind of they'll play hard to get at first, but if we can get them through that, right, and talk with it when we show them we're really committed to it, then they will surrender that.
And I can give it to you in one quick proof. One of the most popular TikToks that are out there are TikToks of grandmas learning TikTok dances with their grandchildren.
Yes.
Why? Not because grandma dance is funny, because some of them are excellent. It's because grandma took enough time to actually have fun with me and learn something that's part of my world. So take that time to learn about your children, your grandchildren, ask them what matters to them, listen to all their crazy music. I was driving our 16-year-old to a class on the way here to do this with you guys, and I listened to a full hour of her music, and she loves her music, and she knows what every band member has ever done, who they're married to, and how many kids they have, and she wants to tell me everything. Is it my music?
I know more about Taylor Swift than I ever wanted.
Do I adore it? Some of it I love, some of it I don't. I love her, and I want to learn about what's important to her. So I'll ask her questions about what's important to her. Get in touch with those people that you love and ask them how to love them.
But again, I just to wrap up, this is all really hard. Okay. So I don't want anybody to feel condemned by this. I don't want anybody to feel, picked on by this or I don't weighed down by the weight of it. This is an invitation to say, look, there's more for you. If you've been settling for something other than this, there's more for you, and you can do it bit by bit by bit.
Yeah, baby step it.
All right.
Well, I want to thank you so much. And I don't think anybody felt put down. That's not your style. And I think your style is very open, very welcoming, very inviting people to try to do something a little bit, step at a time. So very much want to thank you for that. We really appreciate your coming, the presentation, all your wisdom, and all you continue to do for families, for the church in your work. There's so much you're doing. I know that God is smiling all the time. And I have one last question I need to ask you. Any word on the baby?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, I don't know.
The midwife has arrived. She's having a home birth, first birth. Please pray for my daughter-in-law. And the midwife has arrived, and things are starting to progress, and they're setting up. So sometime in the wee hours of the morning,
Yes,
hopefully we will be there. Please keep them in prayer.
yeah.
we will. Congratulations to you and them.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. And thank you very much again. And maybe I'll see you at the World Meeting of Families, and I know that you're going, and I'm going
I
to be there.
certainly hope so. Seek us
Yes.
out. We'll all make it there.
God bless.
Okay. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Good night.
You're welcome. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Take care.